Are you wondering if you should become a freelance grant writer during inflation or during the recession? I'm here to tell you that there are tons of jobs out there for you as a freelance grant writer during these times. Hi, my name is Holly Rustick, and I'm a best-selling author, podcast host of grant writing and funding, and I've been writing grants for nearly 2 decades. I coach people to actually learn how to write grants and set up freelance grant writing businesses, and then to scale them into consultancies. If you want just maybe a side hustle, something in your back pocket where you can actually create revenue from your skills in grant writing, or maybe even open a full-time job, being a solopreneur, or start a grant writing agency, you can definitely do that, and here's why. Okay, so even in times of inflation, a recession, COVID, all of these things that have been happening, there's grant money out there still, and there's always going to be grant money in our lifetime out there. You are always going to have a job, you're always going to have the ability to get clients because nonprofits need you. So let's just look at some basic stats so you can understand the landscape for you to have a lucrative career as a freelance grant writer. First off, in 2022, there were 1.5 million nonprofits that were 501c3s registered in the United States alone. That is a ton of nonprofits that are eligible for multiple grant funding, right? And there's not anywhere near that amount of grant writers out there. So right away, we have an opportunity for nonprofits out there to work with you. But what about grants? Why are we saying grants specifically? Because just when looking at federal grants alone, there is a ton of money sitting out there that nonprofits still want to tap into. During this time of inflation, there's also been social movements going on. The Great Resignation has happened, quiet quitting has happened. There's been a lot going on, and just people now being more comfortable working from home, working on their computers, and not commuting as much, right? There's a lot more of that, being able to communicate on Zoom and just knowing like freelancing isn't such a strange job anymore. Actually, a lot of people are shifting into it. Well, freelance grant writing, if you're part of our tribe here, is one that is definitely growing. And a big part of that recently has been because of inflation. It's been because of these social movements where people just aren't coming in more. It is very difficult now for nonprofits to hire talent, right? And they're competing with a lot of corporations that maybe can pay more up front. So when we're looking at this, there's a lot of opportunity for nonprofits to even think about hiring freelancers, right? So now they're looking at hiring freelancers because they don't have to provide offices for them. They don't have to provide computers. They don't have to pay for fringe benefits, taxes, training, holidays off, vacations, and just thinking about the forever ever payroll, right? So that's a big stress to nonprofit leaders, is to actually have staff, because they're like, I always have to keep them on. I'm funded maybe on these grants that have certain time expirations, and then I have to think about what's gonna happen next. And they're not the only ones who are under that stress. Who else is under that stress? You guessed it. The staff that's working at the nonprofit, thinking, oh my gosh, my job's always, it's always on the line, and not feeling secure. So freelance grant writing, why it's so great is because it is a set contract for a certain duration of time, for a certain amount of money, for a certain amount of deliverables, right? So all of a sudden, you might not be the staff person where you have to run to all of these meetings that have nothing to do with grant writing, and you have to do all the other things. You're just focused on grant writing, or for whatever the scope of work is, right, for that nonprofit. And you know that after 6 months or a year, your contract will be over, and maybe you'll renegotiate for a new one, but at least that's on both sides, you understand where that's going. So for the nonprofit, even though your rate might look a lot higher compared to a staff because of all of those additional things, paying for an office, paying for fringe benefits, time off, training, managing you, they don't have to do, right? So hiring a freelancer is so much easier for them to budget for and to be able to pay out. And it just makes more sense because they're like, oh, you can just focus on writing grants, on thinking about how we're gonna get income for our nonprofit, for our programs, and you're specializing in that. And from the freelancer's point of view, that's really good too, because sure, maybe you have a $15,000 contract to write a federal grant with one nonprofit, but if you have several of those and you may have a longer term client at a higher rate, you really don't need that many clients, and it's not like you're working that many hours then. So you have time to focus on your business, to grow it, to take off when you need to still work out of your house or wherever you want to, and to have that flexibility. And plus, you never know what's gonna happen, as we have all experienced together. It's always good to have the ability to know how to make some money with a skill that you have, no matter what happens. So even if you're like, I'm secure in my job, I love my job at my nonprofit, but maybe you're gonna be retiring soon, right? Maybe that inflation has gone up, but your wages haven't, so you need a little more side income. This is where freelance grant writing can really be a benefit. So let's talk about the money for just a minute, and we're gonna look at US federal grants. They have grown tremendously since pre-pandemic times of 2019, where it was about $4.7 trillion from federal funds for grants. Now we're up to about 6.5 trillion, and there's still money set aside over the next year or two of that big infusion for grants. Even once we expend all of the monies that were infused from COVID times, inflation, all of this, we still have money, as we always have, for grants. The federal government always sets aside funds. Foundations always set aside monies and focus on supporting nonprofit work. And nonprofits don't want to spend all their time just writing grants. They have programs to run, so that is why they need you. So, is there a future for freelance grant writing during inflation, during recessions, during these times? Yes, absolutely. The data does not lie. The money is there. It is available for grants. The nonprofits out there, we saw 1.5 million registered in the United States alone. So now they need you to connect the nonprofits with that money, and that is where you come in. And there's a lot of them that need you. So definitely check out our resources and learn how to become a freelance grant writer. So whether you're doing that on the side, so you can just get a few clients, but you have your business actually organized and implemented, or if you want to do this full time, you can definitely do that, and you can make a very lucrative income. So be sure to check out all of our resources again and subscribe to our channel.